Hello and welcome back to the garage. Welcome back to LeEdFollow. Now today, really exciting, more cool bits going on to Project686. As you can see behind me, I have a Malian 2.75 inch sports exhaust. I've also got a X-Force 2.5 inch sports cat. And on top of that, I've also got a 2.5 inch Scorpion mid-pipe. So you may be wondering, why have I gone for a 2.5 inch / 2.75 inch exhaust system? Right, well, there are a number of reasons, but they're just over here on the whiteboard. Let's just go through them now. So number one is 300 horsepower. That's kind of the power that I'm aiming for. Any more than that, great, but the problem is if you go above 300 horsepower, you're seriously starting to reduce the strength, the life, everything, the gearbox, the prop, the diff, the drive shaft. So if I can stay at around about 300 horsepower, then I don't have to spend a huge amount of money upgrading the drivetrain system. Literally everything stock from a GT86 or a GR86, BRZ, etc. will be fine for this kind of level of power that I'm putting out. Okay, and then the other thing is response and torque. So this is going to stay NA. I'm not going to go turbo, not going to supercharge it. Don't have to, because I'm only aiming for 300 horsepower. 2.5 inch, 2.75 inch exhaust system is perfect for that. If you do your research, if you look at the exhaust systems that they offer for the Subaru Legacy and the Subaru Outback, where this 3-litre engine comes from, they do tend to be 2.5 inch exhaust systems. They don't tend to sell them bigger than that. There's just no need. And then lastly, price. Well, I touched on that a little bit with talking about the drivetrain. By going for a sensible size exhaust system and having sensible power targets, you're going to really look after your wallet. You're going to keep the price down. And that's the whole point of this project. It was always going to be how to make your 86 BRZ Toy Brew, how to make it a flat 6 3-litre and get a big old power boost without spending a fortune. And that's the beauty of this project, is that you don't have to change your gearbox, you don't have to change your prop, don't have to change your diff. The whole factory drivetrain, this engine will just bolt straight up to. So that's why I'm going that way. Now, before I do anything, I need to put back on the heat shield that goes under the rear tyre well above the exhaust system. Now comes the fun bit. Everybody likes a good unboxing. Comes with everything you need, including a set of instructions. In the words of Clarkson, how hard can it be? We just start by finger tightening these, because once the exhaust is hanging in the car, that little bit of give will give us some adjustment if we need to stretch it into a different place. So with both sections now connected, it's time to start fitting this to the car. And I got these nice red polyurethane exhaust hangers off of eBay. They're very cheap. I've got these on the orange 86 as well. They will do the job nicely. So I first start by putting the exhaust hangers on. Not forgetting there's another central exhaust hanger just in front of the diff. That looks pretty good. So I got the Scorpion downpipe out, and you can kind of see how this is going to work. So that's the rest of the Malian exhaust. So one good thing is on this X-Force 2.5 inch sports cat, there's actually an exhaust hanger there, so that's good. That'll help to secure this in place while we're waiting for the engine to go in. So I'll start to join these together, and then I should be able to slide it on in. So the X-Force system comes with two gaskets. There's a smaller one and a larger one, as you can see. Now, this exhaust system is a 2.75 inch, but you can see it's a little bit reduced there. So the slightly bigger, like 3-inch gasket fits perfectly. And then also on the sports cat side, you can see that's a pretty good fit. So this one for this end, smaller one for where the downpipe connects. Okay, so again, finger tightened all the bolts, and we've got a complete exhaust system from the overpipe to the end. So let's get it in.
5 minutes later.
So I kind of hit a bit of a problem. Unfortunately, with the prop shaft hanging down because the gearbox is not connected, there's no way to get the mid pipe sports cat to actually fit without the prop resting on it. So what I'm doing is I'm abandoning the exhaust system for the rest of the day. I'm sorry, but I'll tell you what, there's a couple of good reasons for that. Number one, the overpipe. I've taped it up, but if I have that in place, potentially stuff could fall down into this and it could block up the sports cat. So I've just got stuff resting here in the garage so that I can fit it another day. But you're not supposed to be up there. Now, how do I get you down without you denting the roof of the... No! That! Naughty cat. Psh. Okay, so given how well, or how not well, the exhaust went, let's do something else in this video. Let's fit our brand new discs and pads, and also let's suck through all the brake fluid and make sure it's all nice and fresh. Let's have a look what we got in here. I always like to play brake pad bingo to see what previous owner had put in. I mean, it looks like EBC green stuff, and they're pretty much dead. Let's just see, get the cover off. Ooh, nasty. I actually had to remove the carrier to get them out because they were pretty much like corroded in there, but it doesn't matter because I need to get it off anyway to replace this disc, which of course has been sat for so long. This doesn't want to come off either. Always remember, you can't get this off with the handbrake on. You've got to take the handbrake off. Rookie mistake. I've done it plenty of times. The other thing is, because this is corroded on so much, I've got myself a bolt here. You can use these bolt holes to basically push the disc off. So let's get a socket. Let's start that now. Okay, that worked. Got it off. And the shoes got quite a lot of meat left in them. On these, the shoes are only used for the handbrake. They're not used for the braking system. That's what the rest of the disc is for. So I'm glad I didn't bother buying replacement shoes for the handbrake, because I've never actually had to change a set on one of these cars, and I don't think they really ever wear down, so don't bother. Now at this point, I like to wire brush the surface of the hub before I put a new brake disc on, just to make sure that it's actually sitting nice and flat. Bit of spray, then to speed things up, wire brush on a drill. Then a bit more spray to wipe off all of the crud. So I'm using Bourne Beck discs. I've never had a problem with these, nice and cheap. I believe they're even made in the UK, but I ran these for a long time on the orange Cosworth GT86 before it actually became supercharged. And then I've got some CS Pro, which are just the Cosworth brake pads for the standard calipers, just without the Cosworth brand on them. I guess it was a licensing thing, but these are exactly the same pads. So I've got those for front and back. They even say Cosworth still on the back of the pad. Okay, disc on. Lovely. There's a little rubber thing in there. I think that's for adjusting the handbrake. I won't bother because literally they're going to be tighter in there now, because there's going to be more meat on the inside of this for them to grab against. So just got to reattach the caliper and then take it from there. Now, I am a firm believer in copper slip. Even though these pads come with these anti-squeal pads, I still like to give them a good old dab in the slip, just to make sure you don't hear any squealing from these. As long as you don't put so much on that you risk the actual copper slip touching the disc and the actual biting side of the pad, then I don't think there's a problem. Okay, get the front one in first. This is the one that's got the wear indicator thing to make a noise when they get low. Okay, lovely, looking good. Right, so we've got the caliper here. I need to wind that piston back in because currently at the depth it needed to be for the worn out old pads. Of course, we've got brand new pads in there, so they're much thicker. I need to push that back in. Best way to do this, get one of these tools. You literally just put this in and wind it. That's the way I'm going to be doing it. If you don't, get something like a spanner or a hammer, stick it in there, grab the caliper with both hands and squeeze so that it pushes the piston inwards. But that requires a lot of effort, and I'm getting old. I can't be bothered with that anymore. I'm going to use this. Tool is in, ready to push, but before you do that, always make sure you take the cap off your brake fluid, because that level is going to come up naturally as you're forcing the fluid upwards. Now, you can see we're a bit low on brake fluid. It's just a little bit above that line below max, so probably once we push the calipers in, that brake fluid level will be bang on. Ugh. Gonna change it anyway though. Caliper on, bolts at the back. Okay, so now I want to take a look at this brake fluid. Now you might look at that and be like, oh, that's quite clean, but let me just lift this little retainer. You see how like proper yellow that is? Brand new brake fluid is clear, so that's probably past its best. I'm going to change it. To change it, I'm going to be using one of these, just a hand pump. You just attach this to the bleed nipple on the brake caliper, and you just basically just hand pump the fluid through. You just got to make sure that you keep putting new fluid into the reservoir as the level's going down, so you don't suck the system dry. So bleed nipples here. Come on, there you go. Brake nipple spanner goes on. You can see that's been used before. And I'm going to start by just cracking it loose. There we go. Now these cheap eBay hand pump kits don't fit very well usually, so I just get the closest pipe that will go over the nipple, and then I put a cable tie around the end of it just to keep it nice and tight. You'll know if it's sealing correctly because you should be able to build pressure with it when you pump it. As you can see, I've got like just over, what, 12 in Hugvacs. I'm going to aim for 15. 15 is about the right value for pulling through the fluid. So it's hard to show you with one hand, but essentially you can build up the pressure, then you slowly undo the bleed nipple, and the vacuum starts to pull the fluid through. Fluid goes down the cable, collects here, and then you can dispose of it. So I'm going to just do that a few times, get a load of fluid out, check the level, make sure it hasn't gone dry, and keep topping it up until that fluid runs perfectly clear. Now we're going. Look at that, nasty. And don't worry too much about the bubbles that you can see. That's probably just drawing a little bit of air in around the corner of the pipe, but the air can't get into the caliper as the fluid's rushing out. So don't worry, as long as you don't let the system run dry, air can't get back in this way. When you filled it up, empty it out, start again. So rinse and repeat, and you'll go from that to that. So for comparison, dirty brake fluid on the left, clean brake fluid on the right. And this is what I'm going to be putting in, just regular .5.1. I think the cars come with 4.1 from the factory, but because I'm going to be doing track days, I want 5.1. So with all the fluid changed, I just tighten that up gently by hand and pop the rubber nipple back on, and that corner's done. I'll repeat for the other side, and I'll also do the same for the fronts. So front brakes now. Yellow stuff, a little bit better than green stuff, but not great. They're definitely still going to go in the bin. Oh dear, something unfortunate I've just noticed. So that disc is all nice and flush, but look at the gap between the hub and the... I don't know if you can, let me just see if I can balance this on the heat shield. See how the disc kind of floats up and down? I mean in and out, sorry. That wheel bearing is totally toasted, and see how gravelly that sounds. So I need to change that wheel bearing, and luckily I already have a spare. Somebody probably hit a pothole or something. Anyway, here's the new unit. Don't know if there is a on it or not. Aha, there we go. I actually bought this for the orange 86. When I thought I needed a new wheel bearing, it turned out I didn't. So 4 bolts, 1 hub, let's get cracking. So you can see that this is held in with 4 bolts, and if I go around the back there, you'll see the back of the wheel bearing unit. I was going to undo those. This actually gives me an opportunity to test out my funky new deep impact sockets that I bought. Of course, I opened the box the wrong way. So I've got the new bolt here. 14. Yep, that seems to do it. Oh, okay, right, so all the bolts are out. Okay, so that's out. So all I've got to do is re-clean up that hole, and then I can pop the new wheel bearing in. So I wire brushed the hole clean, again gave it a little bit of oil to help get it in place, and I put the first bolt in. And I'm just getting that kind of loose in there at the moment, and I'll put all 4 in, and then I'll just do them in order. That will slowly bring it in tight. So that's all done now. I've actually torqued those all up. Factory torque settings on those 65 Newton meters, but what I actually did is I torqued it up by using a hammer on a ratchet, because there's not a lot of space in there, and then when I actually subsequently checked them with a torque wrench, I over torqued them, but that's fine. I don't want that coming off on a track day going around a fast bend. I was kind of worried changing the wheel bearing wouldn't fix the issue, but look. No more, hold the disc on nice and flat, but there is no more of that issue with the disc moving in and out. Job's a good one. So carrier on, pads in, put the little wear indicatory things at the top on both sides. Now I need to push these calipers back in. Of course though, with the tool, I can only go in one or the other, and the problem is if I push that one in, that one will pop out. So easy way around that. Sorry, need more hands. Stay. Get one of the old pads, put that in, and then as you push on one, it'll actually push on both of them. So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, all back together. Now the eagle-eyed of you may have noticed this. This is the end of my anti-roll bar, and of course it's not connected to the shock. So I guess when the guy took everything off to turn this into a shell, he just cut these roll bars for speed. He cut the drop link here. So I'm not going to go putting a brand new drop link on there without upgrading these roll bars. So I've got a nice set of white line roll bars for the front and the back of the car. They're going to go on probably in the next video. And at the same time, I don't want to go attaching them to these knackered old shocks. So I've got a set of Tyne Flex Z coilovers going on. So that is pretty much everything for the day. Oh, I could probably do with putting the wheel back on. But the good news is that now that I am at the position I'm at, can't really do the exhaust until the gearbox in, can't do the gearbox till the engine is in. That means the next thing to do is actually test fit the engine. And as you can see, the engine is moved out of the place it's been living. Yes, it's getting exciting today. Ross is heading over. We're going to test fit this, make sure everything lines up as it should do, and then we'll be able to crack on and get this ready to go in permanently. A couple of things from my last video. I mentioned that I'd actually got some better spacers. You can see here I've made up some aluminium bushes to replace all these heavy washers. So I'm currently trying to replace those at the back of the diff, and then I can consider the diff done. The other thing is, when I was filling up the diff in the last video, I said that it takes 2 litres. I was wrong. It takes just over 1 litre. 2 litres is what the gearbox takes. So I begin by removing the plastic intake manifold. There are 4 bolts on either side. Just remove those, disconnect a few hoses, etc., and it pops straight off. That will give me the ability to look down the back of the intake ports, see if there are any leaking valve stem seals or anything. Of course, I'm going to have to flip it over and have a look at the exhaust side also, but happy to report everything so far looking good. But while I'm here, let's grab a little bit of engine degreaser, a bit of carb spray or brake cleaner, whatever you've got lying around, and let's just clean those intake ports up so that they're going back in a better condition than we found them. Hey, you come to help? Hey, you ain't got no thumbs. You can't help. So while I've got the intake manifold off, I've removed the EGR pipe that just goes from the bottom of the intake manifold to the back of one of the heads. There's not really any performance gain by removing this, but I just want to get rid of unnecessary pipe work. And also, because I'm using a standalone ECU, I'm not actually going to enable any of the EGR sensors or functionality, so I may as well just delete the system. Now, rather than buy a kit, all I'm going to do is cut the pipe. I'm going to bend over the ends of the pipe, and I'm going to bolt the two ends back onto the engine. Now, with the intake manifold back on, I'm just giving the injector ports a quick clean before I try to refit the injectors and the fuel rails. This is a great time to fit the brand new Subaru dipstick that I bought. Before reconnecting the injector wiring harness on both sides. So with that, the intake is back on and cleaned, the injectors are back on. Something that isn't going back on is these. There are two of these on the EZ30. They go over the injectors and the fuel rail, and I've actually weighed these. They're about 1.5 kilos each, so easy win, 3 kilograms off the car. You're not going to put these on, basically. But yeah, all the injectors are back in, fuel rails are back on, all the connectors for the injectors are connected. So I'm now going to move on to replacing these can cover gaskets. Finally, should have done these months ago, and then I can fit the new spark plugs. Try to lay the bolts out in the same pattern as where they lived on the can cover, because they're slightly different shapes and sizes. I find laying them out like this makes it a lot easier to make sure they go back in their original place. We can then gently remove any leftover gasket or sealer with a nice sharp blade. Something I found useful, maybe a bit unorthodox, but I had a vacuum to hand to suck away any loose bits of gasket as I was removing them, making sure that nothing ended up in the head. Ross is here, and he's helping out. He's going to clean the back of my throttle body for me while I'm finishing off this. What a mess. See that again? Yeah, that needs a clean.
Even that side's not that great.
Yeah, I mean, the bolts all came out are nice, like you were saying, which means that this engine...
Yeah, the thing it bolts into on the intake manifold is quite nice.
Yeah, and let's see what's in there. Not a lot. I mean, the inside of this engine is pretty clean. Yeah. Like you say, all the nuts and bolts coming out of it are like brand new. So
Right, it's just sat somewhere dirty for a long time.
Yeah, I reckon the inside is not comparable to the outside. I reckon it's been in somebody's yard, sat on a pallet or something. But that's good. I've got confidence this is a good engine. So with the cam cover all cleaned up and drying out, I'm now going to put some RTV on the surface of the head. And as Ross pointed out to me earlier, you don't usually do this. However, because these have such a reputation for leaking oil, I'm going to make sure that the new gasket is stuck on nice and tight. Right, there we are, all gasketed up. So let's grab the cover, put the new gasket in, and get this on before it dries out. Ah, fine job, sir. Very nice. Right, well, I've got that in. Now I'm just going to put the little gaskets in around the spark plugs before we pop it back on. Okay, cover's back on. So while we're here, let's get those spark plugs removed and put the new ones in. Okay, old sparks out, new sparks to go in. 2 down, 1 to go. Oh, shit. Bang it into the head. Beautiful, all back in. Right, let's get it in the car. Ooh, caught on the manhole for half an hour. Does it fit? Yes, it does. Does it fit on the standard engine mount? Yes, it does. How about that? Is it in the right place? We don't know, actually, so let's find. So, as you can see, that's quite a gap between the back of the engine and the firewall. Not quite sure if that's going to be okay or not. Could do with moving a bit further back, to be honest, but I got myself a tape measure, and we've got another 86 to use as a template. So, we're going to measure that gap and compare it to the orange car. No, they're not the same. We just checked the orange 86. And the gap between, it was basically, yeah, because there's not a lot of room to move with the COSI supercharger, but it was from about there that I measured it, and it was about 18, let's get a better grip on this tape measure. It's about 18 centimetres from the firewall to the back of the engine, and we're at 21 here. So we're only talking about a difference of 3 centimetres. However, saying that, it's only resting on the engine mounts. So I think maybe
it'll come backwards a little bit.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. It feels like it's quite level though.
I mean,
doing that would gain you a centimetre or two.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if I push it forward, would you mind
Well, I'll push it. And you
Oh yeah, okay, fair enough. Right, let me just move this out of the way. Change hands with the tape measure. Yeah, you rocking it has gained probably a centimetre or so anyway. Right, so let's go back under the inlet manifold again. Nope. Trying to get it in the same place. It's actually a lot more difficult than it should be. Right. Right, and right, push. Okay, set 20.
Yeah.
So we're talking about
2.
More of a 2 centimetre difference. So that's not too bad. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. If I just take the engine mounts off.
Because actually, there's not a it's a pretty decent amount of space for an exhaust. There's nothing here, right? There's a belt here, but that ends there. So you've got this gap, and you've got all this space. Yeah,
so if I put these on backwards.
Can you lose this?
Yeah, that's not really important. That's really just to hold the front of the bumper up.
So you could coming out into here.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking if I lose this, and I maybe weld some...
Even just make that straighter.
Well, if I just take that off and I weld from like here to there to give it structural rigidity in another place, and then the exhaust manifolds can come up above that, and then round here.
This isn't chassis, this is just crash protection.
That's just basically to support the nose.
That's not making a chassis any stiffer.
No, exactly. So yeah, if I modify those engine mounts, move them forwards 2 centimetres, that will mean the engine is exactly the same place as it needs to be. The gearbox will line up, shifter will be in the right position, and then I gain 2 centimetres at the front to help with the exhaust. Job's a good one. It's a shame to pull it out again, but it has to come out again because
it's got no exhaust.
well, no exhaust manifolds. Yeah, doesn't actually have all the gaskets changed yet. There's no clutch, no flywheel on, and we need to put the gearbox in before we put it back in for the final fit. So I hate to say it, but I think it's time to take it out again.
Well, to be honest, you really need to put it back in again with the thing up in the air so you can measure everything and see everything easily.
Yeah, yeah.
So we need to, next time you do this, you need to get the wheels off and get this up.
Yeah.
Or higher.
Yeah, yeah, totally. But no, what a massive step forward. Achieved so much today. And this is now officially the only flat 686 in the UK. There was one other guy that did it, and he used it for track days. I don't think it was ever road legal, and then he blew it up, and I don't think he's ever rebuilt it. So I'm pleased to say I'm the only one with one of these as far as I know. But if you have one, let me know. I'd love to know if you're doing the same project as well in the UK.
So later that weekend, the engine did indeed come back out again. And as you can see, one of the important jobs that I had to do to the engine is give it a clean.
Okay, so the engine is cleaner. It's not totally clean, but it is a damn sight cleaner than it was. I've done both cam covers. I've cleaned both cam covers. I've gone around all this with an engine degreaser. I've reconnected all the sensors, all the vacuum hoses that I've got. Of course, there are some that will need to be figured out later. And I've put a new earth cable on because the other one was cut somewhere around here. There it is. And yeah, all I've really got to do now is take that pulley off, take the front cover off, inspect the timing chain, inspect the tensioners, inspect the guides, and as long as everything's still timed up correctly, I can reseal this, put it back on, and I've got a brand new pulley and a brand new bolt to go on. So, after all this mediocre stuff, how about we do something fun? Let's flip it over, let's fit that baffled sump. Right, well, with the engine upside down, it doesn't look pretty. I'm going to undo all of these bolts, get the pan off, and then I can get the baffle in. This sump does not want to come off without a fight. So I ended up removing the crappy coolant hose, and that's gone in my box of not to be fitted again. And yeah, as you can see, I've got all the bolts out. This is a good time actually to look at the engine mounts if you're curious as to what they look like. One thing to mention, I did say earlier that I was going to try to move these forward 2 centimeters, but actually when I've had a look at the car, I'm thinking that the reason it's probably about 2 centimeters further forward is because the gearbox isn't attached. With the weight of the gearbox, that will actually pivot the engine that way. It's hard to explain because it's upside down at the moment, but it will pivot the top of the engine backwards, which will probably consume that 2 centimeter gap. So I'm just leaving the mounts as they are. I'm not going to modify them at all, and I'm pretty confident it's all going to end up in the right place. But yes, getting back to that, as you can see, I've got this razor blade here. I'm slowly just lifting the corners of it with the screwdriver and trying to garrote away the sealant, and hopefully, give me some time, I'll have this off. Okay, it's just given away. Using a couple of screwdrivers and a feeler gauge, I managed to kind of garrote the sealant out there. I haven't looked underneath yet, but this is what we've got. Looks pretty clean. There's a little bit of emulsifying going on there, but that's going to be just because it's been sat for so long, just moisture in the air. But looks pretty clean in there. So I'm just going to clean up this edge, make sure that no crap has fallen in, and then I'll get the Possum Bourne Motorsport baffled sump out of the box. Okay, all cleaned up, and now is the fun part. This is the Possum Bourne Motorsport baffled sump for the EZ30. I believe it's the only baffled sump you can buy off the shelf for these engines. They don't make one for the bigger EZ36. That's one of the many reasons I went with the EZ30. So there you go. It actually just pushes in. It sandwiches between the block and the sump. So what I did is I went around with a bit of RTV just so that it had something to stick to. And I'm going to put a couple of these bolts in to hold it in place while I clean the sump. And then I'll put RTF around here and stick the two surfaces together. And with that, the sump is done. I've gone round and tried to torque these up. I couldn't find any torque settings online. I could find the torque settings for the FA20 and the GT86 and the BRZ, and the bolts for that are 6.4 Newton meters, but it didn't really feel tight enough. So I've basically done them all to 6.4, and then I've done them a bit more by hand until they were nice and tight. What else can we do while we're here? I suppose while I've got it like this, I may as well change the thermostat because it's inside there. So two 10mm bolts, and off comes the housing. Be careful not to drop anything down into the exhaust ports. I've covered them up, obviously, with this little tray. And there is the thermostat inside. So, might have to lever that with a little screwdriver. Right, so I use a little flathead and out pop the thermostat. So that's what it looks like in there. Very clean. This is kind of what makes me think this is actually a very good engine. I mean, we won't know till we start it up, but so far it seems to be very incredibly clean inside. Like, it doesn't match what the outside looks like. Anyway, so I don't know whether this thermostat's any good or not, but cheap enough to replace it. And while I've got the engine out of the car, let's get that done. Usually go for genuine Subaru parts, but on this occasion the Subaru thermostat is crazy money compared to the aftermarket, and Gates is a decent brand. I've had these thermostats before, so just like the original one, thermostat and a seal, so it just goes in reverse. Now this is actually a really good opportunity to check the water pump is turning over okay. So I've just got a spanner on the crank, And if I just turn over the engine, okay, so you can just hear the valves opening and closing as we get in compression, but seems to go around okay. Yeah, I can't see any wear on the walls or the blades. Looks pretty good in there, so probably don't need to change the water pump. Right, thermostat back in. Now I've got to put the housing on. Of course, that needs a clean before I do so. And with the housing back on, there we are done for the day. But let's do one more cool thing before we wrap up the video. Let's see if the Raptor SC headers will roughly fit. So, the headers are supposed to go backwards like this. Okay, that's how they're supposed to go in the Legacy. But because of the shape of the 86 subframe, there's no way they're ever going to fit that way. So, my idea is actually to re-drill the holes and put them on backwards. Okay, and then that way, subframe is no longer an issue. Yes, they come a bit proud of the engine, but my idea is to put like a 90 or 45 degree something angle on this and bring it up maybe slightly in front of the engine. I mean, if you look at how high it is, we could come across like this, join up to the other header, and then go under the engine where the stock 86 exhaust system would go. Okay, and if we look, it is resting on that coolant pipe, so that's going to have to move out of the way. But otherwise, that's roughly where it needs to be. Let's have a look at the other side. I know this is the wrong header for this side, but let's just offer it up. Huh, how about that? It looks like it's actually going to clear the oil filter. Wow, how about that? I mean, it's very close to the oil filter. I might actually leave that on. I might leave that oil to water transfer plate there, but I'm going to put a remote filter kit on so I can get the filter out of the way and bring it up to the top of the engine like most modern Subaru engines are. But yeah, how about that? That's looking promising. And there we have it. I am finally finished for the day, so I hope you've enjoyed this bumper edition of LeEdFollow. But the project's getting quite serious now, and we appreciate you coming along for the journey. Yeah, in the not too distant future, this engine is actually going to go in and it's going to be staying in permanently, which is really exciting. So thanks again. See you next time. Bye for now.